This podcast is brought to you by Flipper, the #1 marketplace to buy and sell online businesses and startups. So if you own or run your own online business, have you considered selling your site, your store, your tech, or your app? Well, with world-class combined matching technology, dedicated brokers, and end-to-end services, all at the most efficient price, Flipper makes selling your online business simple. So to get a free valuation, simply visit flipper.com/techtalks. Each month, thousands of online business owners exit with Flipper. Again, to learn more, visit flipper.com/techtalks. That's FLIPPA, flipper.com/techtalks. Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. And today I'm going to be chatting with the CEO of Cipher Skin. His name's Phillip Bogdanovich. And if you're hearing about Cipher Skin for the first time, it's an incredibly cool biometric and motion smart sleeve that is actually used for physical rehabilitation. And their patented technology has numerous applications, including athletic performance and even industrial monitoring, like for things like oil and gas pipelines. But I think it's Philip's inspiring backstory that will steal the limelight today and stay with you long after you've listened to today's episode. Because he is a former US Marine Corps Amphibious Recon medic and was also a tactical medical chief diplomatic protection for the US Dept of State. So today we're going to learn more about all that and also how he launched Cipher Skin after his own physical rehabilitation recovery from combat injuries and also his success with previous startups. So no matter where you are in the world right now, I'm going to ask you to buckle up and hold tight. And the reason being is I'm going to beam your ears all the way stateside so you can join me and Philip in conversation today about all this and how smart wearables are providing data that can be used to improve care and business across healthcare, technology, and many other industries. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
My name is Phillip Bogdanovich. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Cipher Skin. We are a fully hybrid healthcare solution focused on recovery. And prior to this company, I've been a serial entrepreneur for about 12 years. This is the third company that I've run. And prior to that, I was a Navy medic and worked in and out of the Department of Defense for about 15 years.
And there seems to be a lot to unpack there. So there's the military, healthcare, technology. Can you remember where or how all those worlds collided for you and where your passion for tech came from? Because I feel there's got to be an origin story there, right?
Yeah, so tech, I think, has always been interesting. I think, like a lot of people, I think there's a common thread with technical founders, especially where there's, they remember being 5 or 6 years old and taking apart cell phones or televisions. And my parents certainly replaced a lot of microwaves and televisions and remote controls. And, so I think the curiosity began when I was young. And then as far as how that really tied into Cipher Skin and what we're building today, the military environment, especially during wartime, which was virtually all of what I served in, is what we call highly dynamic or kinetic. And so there were a lot of opportunities for injury, and I didn't escape that. So, I've had a number of injuries. I've been shot. We had some blast injuries. I had some blast injuries as well. And the last one was the most catastrophic. It was life-changing. And at that moment when it happened, it was a bridge side bombing that I was in really close proximity to. And when it happened, I didn't realize how hurt I was at the time. And so there's a lot of chaos around it, trying to get back into a safe area, being rescued by a teammate. It was a lot of chaos. And I was able to get to an MRI machine or a CAT scan machine. And they found some fractures in my femur and my pelvis, and in my shoulder, but none of it looked particularly bad. And a couple of weeks later, when I got back to the United States, they realized how bad it was. I had fractured my skull. They found out a couple of months ago, actually, that I had fractured my spine. And so there were these like really like career ending injuries that occurred that I didn't know happened in that moment. And I think fast forward to 2012, and what really got us here today is I was sitting in the VA in Miami, and I was having a conversation about my future. And they said that I needed surgery on my pelvis and my femur and my shoulder and my spine, and just I was never going to run again. I was going to be in a wheelchair probably at some point fairly soon. And so I decided I was going to get one more deployment in, and on that deployment, I met the co-founder, and I was able to nearly completely recover. And so that recovery is kind of the story of Cipher Skin, and how we started thinking about making that recovery accessible to every person on the planet in this like portable way. And so we built a device in the form of a sleeve that talks to an application. And, here we are, 6 years later, 7 years later, taking it out into the world.
Wow, such a powerful story. So you met your co-founder there. I'm curious, can you just expand on that? How you gone from meeting him to creating a solution, getting the technology ready, making it work, etc.? Because there's a lot of hoops you had to jump through to bring this to life, right?
Yeah, it wasn't that quick, unfortunately. I think we also took for granted exactly how long and difficult that journey would be. So working with Craig, who's the co-founder, Craig Weller, he and I were able to meet and train every day to recover my strength and recover my mobility. And the entire time that I was on this last deployment, so for almost 6 months and 6 days a week, if we weren't out on mission, we were training. And so with him, I was getting all the way to like the very threshold of what my body could take without tipping over into injury. And that's what got me back. It was reaching my physical maximum without pushing beyond it. And that is what improved my strength. That's what brought my mobility back to me. And unfortunately, at the time, there was no way to digitize that because it required a person to physically be standing in front of me. There was no way to digitize this experience of one Craig watching one Phil. And so 2015, I was sitting in my living room and we had kind of forgotten about this idea. And my partner, Emily, walked in and set a bag of groceries on the counter. And she took this bottle of wine out and she took the protective mesh covering off of it, and I watched it expand and contract around the bottle, expand around the base of the bottle, and then conform to its normal shape. And I just happened to be reading a paper that our now CSO, James Heathers, sent on the mucosal conductivity of earthworms. And I realized in that moment that if we applied the principles in this paper to a material like I just saw, we could embed it in textiles and monitor motion and vital signs. It was literally that quick. And I called Craig. It was 11:30 at night, and I said, "Craig, I figured it out." And he said, "It's 11:30 at night. I have no idea what you figured out." And I said, "I know how we can do this." And I walked him through it. We filed the first patent. We built the first prototype in the garage. The estimates that we were given by contract firms was $3 to $3.5 million, and they didn't think it was even possible to build it. We built it in my attic for just under $4,000. We still have the videos. It's pretty amazing to look back on. And then we filed another 11 patents based on those early prototypes, and it's been further refined, and we've built a team around it, and we're here. So I think the founder journey is always I think long and arduous. But that first moment really began with a spark. It really was an aha moment.
It's incredible. I mean, I've interviewed, I think, 2,200 people now, and I always ask these questions. I'm fascinated by the origin story and what that spark is. And I would say a good 90% of people have similar moments like that, and we always like to think that we've got free will and we're the master of our own destiny and we make stuff happen, but it's almost like the universe gives you that little nudge in the right direction, right?
It certainly felt like that at the time. It was just there was a moment before Emily walked in the door that I was reading a paper, and the moment she walked in and set that bottle of wine on the counter changed my life. Like, wow. It was that moment right then. Yeah, it's amazing.
Incredible. And for people hearing about you guys for the first time, just to set the scene, what is hybrid care and how does it differ from things like telehealth, for example?
So I think hybrid healthcare is the future of healthcare. To put it bluntly, hybrid healthcare is the future of health. Patients are unique. Their journeys are unique, where they need to be treated, how they need to be treated. And it seems like this really sort of decentralized, often fragmented experience between their providers and where they are and where best care is available. And so hybrid healthcare is this idea, and fully hybridized healthcare is this idea that you can meet patients, and more importantly, the patient-provider relationship where it is at any given point on, sort of that patient journey. So a hybrid experience is being able to maybe start in a brick and mortar facility, start in a hospital. For us in recovery medicine, so maybe someone is preoperative and they come in to their physio and they begin physical therapy and recovery before their surgery, which is becoming progressively more prevalent because studies indicate outcomes are much better. And they begin with us, Cipher Skin, right then. So their measurements can be digitized, visualized in the dashboard, transmitted to their medical record. But then if that patient goes home, the product can go with them. And from that same platform, the PT can start a telesession. So telesession is a component of hybrid healthcare. And they can start a telesession with that patient who connects the sleeve to the patient app. The patient app communicates with the provider through the provider app, and they're able to have the same really great experience. And where this becomes fully hybridized is we can provide that experience on a phone, on a tablet, on a computer. And so it's really good care from anywhere on any digital product, right? That's fully hybrid. And so that leads to better outcomes. And that's another kind of, I think, kind of murky question for a lot of people. What does a better outcome mean? And it depends on the area of medicine that you're serving in. And so for us in physical medicine and recovery, it's very, very clear. It's a really good outcome is complete recovery or improved recovery in range of motion, right? Like, can you move as well or better than you did prior to surgery? Do you have your strength back? And have those things improve your quality of life, right? And where you fit on that continuum, where I feel 19 years old again and I have full recovery back, I am not in any pain. That's like a 10, right? Like that's a 10 to 10. And a 0 is I have no recovery, I'm in constant pain. And so where you are on this continuum, and that's that patient experience, that's how we measure and quantify what constitutes like a really high quality outcome, right? And I think hybrid care is at the core of that.
And as this is a tech podcast, I've got to talk about the biometric and motion data that is collected through Cipher Skin. And if we look at that side of things, what are the possibilities for care when it comes to using that and data and applying AI and all those cool aspects of tech too? Because it seems that tech is right at the heart of this and what you're doing, right?
It is. I think when you combine the principles of fully hybridized healthcare with tech is when you get to the next evolution of human health, when you start thinking about healthier people who are spending less time in care facilities and more time enjoying their lives. And in the sense of Cipher Skin and how that works with us, we right now today collect heart rate, O2 saturation, skin temperature, and full spatial orientation. And what that means is we can see somebody moving like a video game. So if you wave your arm around, the avatar that you're looking at and the data that drives it is a limb moving around freely in space. It's not just a starting point and an end point, but it's an actual visualization of moving around in space. And that's really unique, especially in this hybrid environment. And the way that moves the ball forward begins with stress, load, fatigue, and recovery. If you think about a stress test in a laboratory where you're on a treadmill, maybe you have, maybe you're on ECG monitors and you have O2 sat on and you're connected by wires to a central machine. We have disconnected those wires. And so we make that experience complete with quality of motion available through a digital wireless tool that can be utilized anywhere on the planet. And so we can help people evaluate their stress and recovery relative to training, relative to medical physical therapy programs or whatever it is. So we can evaluate that stress. That's a very, very beginning of it. But where that goes is all of that information being available at critical mass in a database becomes searchable. And that searchable database is, I think, to the conversation we were having before about the spark, that's the spark to predictive healthcare, right? Like that's the brass ring, is being able to understand probably initially what's going to happen to someone in a couple of days, right? Being predicted by a couple of hours or a couple of days, and then a couple of weeks, and then a couple of months, and then being able to understand someone's trajectory 6 months out or a year out. That kind of predictive medicine becomes available when you have a clean, robust data set, and we are in motion and mobility at the core of creating it.
And I've got to ask, what type of providers and company are you working with at the moment? And we do have an international audience. So are you only serving the US at the moment and looking to expand, or is there anything you can tell me about that too?
So we right now are primarily in the United States.
Yeah.
We are also working with a university in Belgium. We're working with the university, Wolverhampton University, on a study. I think there's more room to talk about that, but I would need to talk with our chief science officer about it to figure out how in depth we can go on that. But we are working with Wolverhampton University. And
oh, wow. Well, we're going to have to get you back on to talk about that, because that's where I'm talking to you from today. I'm in Wolverhampton. What are the odds of that happening? Yeah.
That would be incredible.
Another crazy coincidence for you right there.
Amazing. Yeah. So we're evaluating this internationally. We eventually, the goal is to be global. I don't think that any individual or group or country should control the quality of healthcare. I think really good healthcare, really good quality of life, more importantly, should be available to everyone on a global stage. And so while we're starting here, we are starting to kind of reach out into a global market to become accessible. And so the vital signs are the same, no matter where you are. It is equally important to surgeons and physios in Australia or the UK or, Scotland or Abu Dhabi as it is to folks in Palo Alto, California. And so, we want to make that accessible. And so we're certainly happy to have those conversations. It just so happened, because we're home-based here, that it started here.
And I know we can't talk too much about those partnerships, but do you have a use case that you could possibly share just to bring what we're talking about here to life and help people understand how it might work in their world?
So there's two, I think, that are really interesting, and it demonstrates the sort of full spectrum of what this is and where we're going. We are in the midst of final formulation of a partnership. So we're working with a professional football club, soccer club for all the I think American folks that are listening. So that with a football club in Europe to monitor their players as they're going through the season, to evaluate stress and recovery relative to their training and game schedule. So that's on one end. And then on the other end, we are finalizing our relationship with the VA hospital, so the hospital system that serves veterans, as well as several large physical therapy groups through the United States to evaluate people post-op that have had a surgery. A lot of them tend to be, in this case, knees, and a lot of those knees are osteoarthritis. That's where the alignment right now is on cost and burden on the system, where a really good technical implementation like ours that can be used in a clinic, that can be taken home when a patient progresses to at home, can be used. And so all of that exists in the context of osteoarthritis leading to knee surgeries, and then trying to prevent that from becoming chronic. And so there's a lot of use there. And then on the complete other end, healthy footballers.
Awesome. Absolutely love it. And you mentioned there how you feel early on in the podcast, you mentioned that you feel that the future of healthcare is hybrid care. So can you tell me a little bit more how you see that future evolving of hybrid care and the role that wearable technology, et cetera, will play in that?
Yeah, so I'm really bullish on wearables. And when I say wearables, I mean smart clothing, integrated clothing. I mean applications, software based. I mean the ability to take information physically off the body, whether it's us or a Whoop strap or a Garmin watch, and being able to integrate that information into a single database where it can be searched. Now, the fidelity of that information will vary clearly, but if the query is properly structured, then you aren't looking at, say, Garmin or Whoop for medical outcomes. Maybe you're looking at it for mobility and stress, and you integrate tools like Cipher Skin to look at post-operative recovery outcomes, right? And so if the information is there, then we can begin to learn what we can do with it. And the reason that I'm so bullish on, let's call them on-body devices, is because when you think about camera systems, they have a place. They do. Motion capture is right now, markerless and markered motion capture is the most accurate way to capture a moving body, a moving human body. However, they are really costly to set up. They're large and they're complicated. And it plays into this fear that people have of being watched by machines, right? And when you think about garments and clothing and smart garments on the body, people have crossed that bridge. And so the ability to embed things in the stuff that we wear every day for the purposes of monitoring biometrics and vital signs, and then the person being able to choose to share that into a central database, feels for a lot of people more controlled. And it's also something that we can embed in something that's already in the world, like a package of Hanes t-shirts. And so I'm really bullish on the future of health tech as it relates to on-body wearable sensors, especially for platforms like Cipher Skin that are material agnostic and sensor agnostic. And so our patents protect us regardless of what sensors are embedded into a Cipher mesh, which is the kind of lattice that's spread throughout a Cipher-enabled garment, and what that conductive material is made out of. So as sensors become more robust, they monitor different things. I think a lot about glucometry. I think a lot about skin galvanization and sweat content. I think that there's a big future there. Combining that with heart rate, and skin temp, and O2 and motion, and like really having a very good, sort of like eventually lab quality from the garments that folks are wearing. I think that is the future that begins to keep people from having to go in because they can be evaluated remotely. And I think that motion capture and video plays a role in that. But there's a threshold there because it's harder to take out into the world. So that's what I think. And I think that there's also this like really interesting, we start thinking about, garmentization of sensors, and we start thinking about healthcare. We have CK, who's the head of hardware at Meta, who's an advisor to us. She's on our advisory board. And we had this conversation about 10 or 15 years from now, and maybe sooner, I could see this place where someone can put on VR headwear in their living room and step into a virtual healthcare clinic with haptic feedback.
Wow.
And being able to have a fully digital experience in Cipher Skin where they have labs and they're interacting with a provider. And so I think that there's a really interesting future there in VR. I think there's a really interesting future. There's a company called Proto that we work with that does really interesting stuff in hologram and the transmission of the digital self. Like there's so much bleeding edge tech in bringing great healthcare into the home that I'm super bullish on the future, and I'm really honored to be a part of it. It's really incredible to see unfold in real time.
It really is incredible and incredibly cool too. And well, I think one of the things that I've learned from listening to you today, we've already had two very big coincidences or nods from the universe there with the Wolverhampton connection and when your partner came in with that bottle of wine. I'm thinking we should push our luck a little bit here, because some of the biggest names in VC funding, tech have either been guests or listened to this podcast. So is there a person that you would love to have a private breakfast or lunch with, and why? Because we're going to try and manifest this together. We'll send it out into the universe. Right. So what are you going to choose? Who are you going to go with?
Put it out into the world.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting question. As I've been working in the Bay, a lot of really great individuals have made themselves, available and helped us along the way. Jeff Jordan at Andreessen being one of them, Tim Draper, it's a really long list of people that have really helped us and stood behind Cipher as we've grown. I think someone that I would like to sit down with and just talk to that's in the VC and investment space is Mark Cuban.
Yeah.
I think we share a lot of opinions on the future of tech. I think he's a really bright individual. I think that he's a polymath. I appreciate his view of the universe, and I think having a conversation about sports, the broader impact of data, and what that means for recovery and human wellness going into the future would be really, really interesting. And also, he lives in Dallas, and so I'm sure that guy cooks some mean migas. So I which is eggs and it's like a Texas breakfast, eggs and sausage and tortilla chips. So I think a really good migas breakfast with Mark Cuban would be amazing.
Oh, man, I'm feeling hungry already. I need to be at that meeting too. But before I let you go, for anyone listening, just wanting to find out more information about anything we talked about today, maybe even look at a few videos that you guys have done as well, just to see how it works in the real world. What's the best starting point for everything, including contacting you or your team as well?
Yeah, I think reaching out to us on the website at cipherskin.com. We love talking to folks. We really enjoy answering questions. And I think the more that we talk to people, the more that we learn. Some of the questions that we get, both technical and medical provider and the user and the patient, which is so important, through the questions that we get asked and the outreach on the website really informs the product that we build. And we do listen. And so the feedback is really valuable. Or if you just want to see something cooler, have a discussion, please reach out. So yeah, cipherskin.com. We'll get back to you.
Awesome. Well, I'll add those links to the show notes so people can find you nice and easily. On the blog post that I do on my website, I'll also attach one of those videos just so people can see that. I love chatting with you today, and what an incredible story. Honestly, several times I had the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. So we're going to shoot for the moon. We're going to try and get you that meeting with Mark Cuban. But more than anything, just a big thank you for taking the time to sit down, share your incredibly powerful story. And we will get you back on next year once you square it with Wolverhampton University. But thanks for joining me today.
All right. Thank you.
Wow, what a story. So much I could talk about forever there. And yes, Phillip has been added to my cool guys I want to share a beer with. I just love those moments of serendipity, how the universe pointed him in the right direction when he needed it. And also how he recovered from those horrific combat injuries too. And I think for many of us, we come across problems, we complain about them, tell everyone that will listen just how frustrating a particular problem is or how it's getting us down. But when I speak with people like Phillip and they talk about how they've actually created a solution to that problem and dedicated their life to that solution, and the universe has pointed them in the right direction as a result, inspiring stuff. I could listen to these stories all day. So Phillip, a big thank you for coming on. And everyone listening, if you've got a story or you know somebody that's got a story like this and maybe a moment where the universe has pointed them or you in the right direction, I'd want to hear about it and I want to share it on here. So whether you want to sit down for a whole episode or maybe you just want to share the story, that I can read it out or even record an audio message that I can play on a future episode. Whatever it is, we can do anything here. We're the boss, right? So email me now, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram @NeilC.Hughes. We'll keep this conversation going. And if you've got nothing to add today, don't worry. I'm just going to cordially invite you to join me again tomorrow. We'll do it all again. So a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.